get up and get out. Get rid of that frown that's been dragging you down and get up in the air. Just pretend that you can fly. You'll never know if you can till you try.
Hi, and welcome to Cannabis Helps Dementia. I'm Chella.
I'm Dave. And right up front, we'd like to say we're not doctors or medical professionals, and nothing you hear in this podcast should be considered medical advice.
Right.
We're not experts. But throughout this podcast series, you'll hear from doctors, nurses, research scientists, administrators, caregivers, and people living with dementia about how cannabis helps.
Like it did for our family.
That's right.
After my mom was diagnosed with dementia, we were thrust into family caregiving and became fierce advocates for all people living with dementia, which, as you might know, is a mental health issue.
This is an ever-growing concern in the world, especially in America, where it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and where the number of people aged 65 and older with Alzheimer's disease is expected to reach 7.1 million by 2025. That's a 27% increase from the 5.6 million in 2019.
2019 was the year my mother completed her nearly decade-long odyssey with Alzheimer's disease, and we began our journey into exploring why cannabis medicine so dramatically helped with her quality of life.
In our first episodes of Cannabis Helps Dementia, we gave you a little background and some of the story of our time as care partners for Mom, followed by interviews we collected in Northern California, the heart of cannabis medicine for seniors. That exploration begins with renowned cannabis clinician Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather, who you can hear in episode 3. He introduced us to the work of geriatric psychiatrist Dr. Philip Grobe, the radical priest of cannabis in Santa Rosa, who you hear in episode 4.
We met Becky, one of Dr. Grobe's patients who suffered terribly from frontotemporal dementia. The only relief from agitation and aggression in the final years of her life was from cannabis medicine in the form of a chocolate edible. You'll hear that story from her amazing husband, Gary, in episode 5.
Becky was welcomed with open arms by only one care facility in Santa Rosa, one that was working with Dr. Grobe and has been using cannabis medicine for some of their residents since 2008. In episode 6, you hear from the co-creator and the executive director of Primrose Engaged Living for Alzheimer's, along with their wellness director, about the benefits of adding cannabis therapeutics as one of the tools that reduces the need for large amounts of black box antipsychotic drugs, thereby reducing risk and enhancing quality of life.
2019 was incredibly inspirational for us, and we knew that this information had to be shared with the world, which is why we decided to launch this Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast in 2020.
And who knew that our personal experience with a loved one living with dementia would also continue? But with 44% of the people in the U.S. between the age of 75 and 84 currently suffering from Alzheimer's, I guess it shouldn't be totally unexpected. So, welcome to our Week in Dementia Care 2020. In this episode, we share how the U.S. healthcare system fails people living with mental health issues.
An old friend of my mom's,
Let's call her Evelyn to protect her privacy.
Evelyn, and Mom were friends since I was in high school in the 80s. She worked in real estate at the same office as my mom. She was beautiful, had great style, and loved to date younger men. She was so funny and loved going to the movies. Originally from Iowa and grew up in Oklahoma, she loved Asian art and culture and studied Buddhism.
Evelyn told us she was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment a couple of years or so after Mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, around 2012.
Evelyn would come hang out with my mom once a week, and they would go out to lunch together until I realized Evelyn shouldn't be driving. In October 2018, my mom was in hospice, and it was also obvious that Evelyn was in need of real support. She was still living alone. With no family in the state, I started helping her tidy up a bit, shop for groceries, and sort out paying her bills.
Her phone and electricity had been disconnected several times for lack of payment.
And she had lots of mail and papers piling up.
Executive function is one of the first things that is an obvious symptom of Alzheimer's disease.
I brought her to the geriatrician, where Evelyn assigned me as her medical power of attorney. And while Evelyn was out of the room, the doctor told me that she was prepared to make an Alzheimer's diagnosis. I was shocked. Evelyn's dementia looked so different. It was so much slower moving, it seemed, compared to my mom's.
Yeah, but you know what they say. If you've met one person living with dementia, you've met one person living with dementia.
I know. Mental health issues are so tricky. People don't look sick.
Evelyn was officially diagnosed in April 2019 by her geriatrician at a large HMO who had previously seen her and tracked her decline.
I tried to prep Evelyn by having her draw clocks at home. That's when I realized she was struggling.
She was great at covering, though, especially at the doctor's or when a figure of authority was present.
Same with my mom. It can be so frustrating. Learning so much from Doctors Hergenrather and Grobe, I sat down with Evelyn and talked about the possibilities of cannabis therapeutics. However, she didn't want to go see a cannabis medicine specialist yet.
Always an adventurous spirit and not cannabis naive, she was game to try something new. Cannabis as medicine.
She started a 1-to-1 CBD to THC tincture oil in capsules. At first, she asked for more THC. She liked the euphoric feeling, especially at night, so we got her a 1-to-1 vape pen. No flames, but she wanted more THC, so we got her a THC-dominant vape pen. She was fairly stable for 8 months, except for one UTI.
I wish she wasn't living alone all that time because she wasn't as consistent with dosing as one would like. But when she was taking her meds on time, she was happy, peaceful, and enjoying day-to-day life. After Evelyn's official Alzheimer's diagnosis, the doctor advised her to start looking at assisted living facilities to prepare for the future.
Typical of her generation, she'd believed in insurance, and she'd bought a long-term health insurance plan that would begin to reimburse up to a certain amount after an Alzheimer's diagnosis. One good thing about an official diagnosis was that it was the key for Evelyn to start receiving benefits from the policy she'd been paying on for more than 25 years.
Which she could never have figured out without help from her friends and family. Many seniors are living alone without that support, but they are still expected to navigate the healthcare and insurance systems to get the mental health services they need, and they may not be aware of that need.
Evelyn's out-of-state family has stepped up to support her by administering her financial life. Her long-term care insurance plan is a reimbursement plan, so you have to pay up front, and you get paid back after. To move into a facility, they have to pay the first month and a move-in fee and wait to be reimbursed.
Yeah, fortunately, Evelyn's family is in a position to manage doing all that.
She had no children, was always the wild one, the black sheep, the one who moved to California, and still they love her and are there for her. She's a very lucky lady.
We worked with 3 different agencies, looked at several assisted living facilities, and called scores more looking for a place in the Los Angeles area for Evelyn to move into as her needs evolved.
We asked each place we called if they had a cannabis medicine protocol. None in her budget, and only one that we called had an established program, as is required, like we learned from episode 6 with Primrose.
It's mind-boggling because Los Angeles is the largest legal cannabis market in the world, but it's not common practice to allow cannabis medicine for seniors in assisted living facilities.
Totally mind-blowing. Evelyn's niece lives in Texas, and the bang for your buck is way better there.
Texas has a medical CBD law that specifically states that CBD is approved for use in treating Alzheimer's disease.
So last week, we drove Evelyn to meet her niece at the airport.
In Las Vegas.
And off she went to the lap of luxury.
There was a lot of drama in between, as you might imagine.
Oh, yeah. There were many doctor visits explaining why she needed to move to a place where she could have more support for her changing needs as soon as possible.
And when the coronavirus created a worldwide pandemic, her anxiety and fear of being alone escalated suddenly, and to a point where she really wasn't safe or enjoying life at all.
She refused to use the vape pens any longer. Seemingly overnight, she came to believe that THC was causing more anxiety, which is possible.
We got her CBD vape pens, but she refused to use them, suddenly referring to cannabis by the derogatory prohibitionist term, marijuana.
We changed her cannabis oil capsules to CBD dominant and increased the doses to 4 times a day.
Without a knowledgeable cannabis clinician like Dr. Jeff Hergenrather, this is how families have been using cannabis therapeutics with their loved ones for decades.
Keep a detailed notebook.
We're not doctors, but news of the pandemic exacerbated Evelyns' anxiety. We put parental controls on cable news channels, but the networks were still on and making life harder for our confused friend.
Due to the extraordinary world circumstances, we didn't have time to experiment and needed the big guns. A year after her diagnosis, Evelyn finally had to start taking a small dose of a commonly prescribed black box antipsychotic 3 times a day in addition to the CBD. It was helpful. It didn't completely resolve her issues. I mean, she knew she had Alzheimer's disease and was moving to assisted living. Of course she was struggling with those life-changing concepts.
And as we're all learning through this pandemic, isolation can be hard on people, not just those living with a terrifying terminal diagnosis.
It was obvious to Evelyn in moments of clarity that she needed to move to assisted living right away, but was overwhelmed by the thought of moving out of the apartment she'd been living in for 20 years.
Evelyn simultaneously wasn't ready to move into assisted living, but also kept taking a cab to the emergency room during a deadly pandemic over her crippling anxiety.
From being alone.
Once Evelyn got to the hospital, she forgot she was anxious because she was surrounded by medical professionals.
She presented as being competent to the nurses and doctors and complained of pain. So they never called her medical power of attorney to tell me what was going on, or that they were sending my friend living with dementia home alone into the night. Multiple times.
Anything could have happened to her. Now Evelyn is safe and comfortable in Texas near her family, surrounded by the support she needs.
She's been there for about a week.
In quarantine, waiting to be cleared of coronavirus.
We've been packing up her apartment according to her wishes.
And Wednesday, we sent that all off to meet her at her new home.
It was so hard for her. Once the decision had finally been made, knowing she was moving soon, she kept emptying out cabinets and drawers all over the apartment, adding to everyone's confusion and anxiety.
When we were there, she used the CBD vape pen, but wouldn't if she was alone, which, despite having a caregiver 3 times a week, was most of the time. The underlying mental health issue that Evelyn is dealing with, Alzheimer's disease, is destroying at least 2 parts of her brain right now. But on the outside, she looks fine.
One reason mental health awareness is so urgent is that we often cannot see the issue. The person doesn't look sick.
This is so hard for families.
A person living with dementia is working hard, doing the best they can all day long. So by the end of the day, they're completely exhausted. Of course, confusion and agitation make it worse.
I can see how that might contribute to, quote, sundowning behaviors.
Exactly, but it's really hard when you're in it. Evelyn's big California HMO called me to coordinate the medication list for her admission to the assisted living facility in Texas. Yet they neglected to share with Texas that Evelyn has been using CBD in California.
So, at her new facility, in quarantine, she is not currently getting any CBD and hasn't for almost a week.
That's right. She called her family totally freaking out today. Confused, crying, feeling betrayed, really, really struggling.
It seems like she needs a medication adjustment.
Yeah, she does. She needs her CBD.
Yeah, don't we all? In episode 6, the wellness director at Primrose Engaged Living tells us that he has observed that for some patients, cannabis medicine acts as a foundation for all the other more harmful prescription drugs. And without cannabis medicine, the others don't seem effective.
Dave, do you remember the study that showed that CBD helps morphine work better? The one entitled Cannabidiol Enhances Morphine Antinociception, Diminishes NMDA-Mediated Seizures, and Reduces Stroke Damage via the sigma-1 receptor?
Published in the Journal of Molecular Brain online on September 2018. You can find a link in the show description.
You do remember. We know for a fact that a 30-to-1 CBD tincture eased my mom's death rattle until her last breath. She needed 2 drops every hour around the clock, but it gave her ease and flow.
We need more studies.
Especially to send to Texas for Evelyn's niece to advocate for Evelyn to get CBD in her new assisted living facility. CBD is new in Texas.
Facilities and doctors are looking for ways to use fewer black box drugs. We may need to help educate them about new options like how cannabis helps dementia.
They can get some great education every Friday when new episodes of Cannabis Helps Dementia drop.
Coming up on the next episode of Cannabis Helps Dementia, we speak with Evelyns Diagnosis, president of the American Cannabis Nurses Association.
Eloise is a board-certified geriatric nurse practitioner who's cultivated a wealth of knowledge and data for using cannabis to treat a broad range of conditions and diseases, especially those that commonly affect seniors.
Eloise is a co-founder of Radical Health, developing ongoing cannabis education for healthcare professionals and the community, as well as patient care and industry training.
Eloise Thiessen will be presenting at CanMed this year, and she gives us a preview of her study.
50 seniors with dementia being treated with very low levels of THC.
Spoiler alert.
The study shows beneficial results in 80% or more of the participants.
That's amazing. In episode 9, we meet Dr. Jordan Tischler, founder of Inhale MD in Boston, Massachusetts.
Dr. Tischler graduated from both Harvard College and Harvard Medical School. He trained and is faculty at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School.
He spent years working with veterans at the VA.
As a leading expert on cannabis therapeutics, Dr. Tischler employs Western medicine and cannabis care to treat a wide array of illnesses.
He's the president of the Association of Cannabis Specialists, which aims to educate clinicians, lawmakers, and the industry about best practices and needed tools for proper patient care. His father, a former physician himself, is living with dementia.
Mental health awareness is every single day for people in relationship with dementia.
We want to thank all the doctors, nurses, research scientists, administrators, caregivers, and people living with dementia for talking with us, breaking the stigma, and helping people with no other options.
Thanks for joining us for Cannabis Helps Dementia. Be sure to download and like us on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcasting network.
And please share this podcast with anyone you know in relationship with dementia.
Do you want to tell your story of how cannabis helps dementia? Visit Anchor FM/Cannabis Helps Dementia to leave us a voice message, or drop us a note and connect with us on the socials.
Check out the Society of Cannabis Clinicians website to find real medical professionals familiar with cannabis medicine in your area.
Because you remember, we're not doctors.
Just family caregivers turned advocates.
And don't forget, download, like, and share what you learn. Cannabis helps dementia.
Why don't you get wise? Get up and get out. Get rid of that frown that's been dragging you down and get up in the air. Just pretend that you can fly. You'll never know if you can till you try. So get out of your right. Be able and strong. Give vent to that intent you've had pent up for so long. Come on up and see what it's like being out where you're free. Just do something as